So we are about to start the panel titled Strategic Innovation for National Defense, Leveraging Canada's Global Innovation Clusters, organized by Digital. But first, most of you already know the drill, but for those who are just joining us, a little reminder. This year, CSPC provides simultaneous translation and closed caption for all panels in both French and English. You can scan the QR code on your table to download the app and access subtitles in your preferred language, but please use your headphones. And if you're a social media person and you would like to tweet or share a post, you can use @SciencePolicy and hashtag CSPC 2025. I hope you enjoyed the panel. And now I will pass it on to our moderator, Ian Klugman, CEO of NorthGuide. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. So we're the last panel in between you and an adult beverage. So I'm really glad you're here. I'm surprised how many people are here. So thank you for coming out. Appreciate it. I think it was the guest appearance of some of these folks here today that brought you out. So we appreciate that. We're going to talk a bit about global innovation clusters, formerly known as superclusters, and how they have and continue to pivot to support the priorities of the Government of Canada and all Canadians. We're going to start a bit by just giving a level set so that everybody's got a sense as to who these people are and what they do. So I'm just going to ask each of you to introduce yourself, and very briefly, and I will tell you if you're not brief enough, Kendra, explain what it is that your organization does. So why don't we start right in the middle, Kendra?
Okay. So Kendra McDonald, I'm based in St. John's, Newfoundland, and I'm the CEO of Canada's Ocean Supercluster. So we are the global innovation cluster responsible for driving ocean growth in Canada.
Wonderful, thank you.
Hello, my name is Julien Billot from Montreal. I'm the CEO of Scale AI. The role of Scale AI is basically supporting the industry of artificial intelligence in Canada by helping Canadian companies adopt AI and create Canadian IP and Canadian properties.
Hi, I'm Sue Page. I'm the CEO of Digital. We bring together the builders and the buyers of technologies so that they can work together, collaborate around the table, and help Canadian companies lead the world in the development and deployment of digital technologies.
Wonderful. And down at the end.
Hi, everyone. My name's Robbie McLeod. I'm the Senior Director of Communications for NGen. We're the Advanced Manufacturing Supercluster, and we're based in Hamilton, Ontario. Our mission is to build world-leading advanced manufacturing capabilities in Canada.
And finally.
Yeah, good afternoon. Tyler Greneveld. I am the CEO of Protein Industries Canada. We're based out of Regina, Saskatchewan. And our role is what we work with the food production and agricultural industries to generate incremental value from the crops, the commodity crops that we value across the country from coast to coast.
Wonderful. Well, now you've met the contestants today. We're going to get right at it. The other thing I wanted to mention is if there are questions that people have, they're more interesting than my questions, please feel free to put your hand up and we'll get you to come up to the mic and we can take your questions throughout. As opposed to saving them for the end, we do want to try and make this as interactive as possible. So this program, as it was launched, the Global Supercluster Program, was launched at a time, and Dr. David Wolf can tell us about the research he's been doing about that at some point in time, was launched when there was a real need to invest in the notion of clusters. And the notion of clusters as a mechanism by which to do a better job of commercializing technology that was being developed within Canada and support the growth of great Canadian companies. But let's think back to those times. Some of you, not Tyler, were around at that time, not Tyler. He's been on the job for 2 weeks, just so you know, so we're really looking forward to his answers. But when you think back to that time, what is it that you were thinking then, and what would it be that you have learned along the way, or would it be that you wish you had known or done at that time when you were starting up as you look back and reflect back to 2017? This one's an open one for anyone. Sue.
Okay, I'll dive in. I always feel like amongst the five of us, I'm all the one that puts up my hand, but okay. So when the policy was announced in 2017 to create what was then called the Innovation Supercluster Initiative, I was not in the technology world. I've never been in the technology world. I'm a recovering lawyer and healthcare professional. But one thing that I had noticed over the previous sort of 30 years of working in government-regulated industries was how slow and ineffective we were in terms of developing and deploying new technologies. And the whole theory around investing in innovation at that time, through my lens, was that we used a slingshot approach. I am going to invest in your company or your technology. Here's some money. Have a nice day. I hope it works. And what the data showed us was that Canada was very, very good at creating small companies, spin-outs out of research facilities or universities, and creating lots and lots of startups. And we were kind of okay at getting startups to maybe the next level. I wouldn't necessarily even say scale up, but we were really quite dreadful at growing Canadian-made, homegrown SMEs or startups into global leaders. And in fact, outside of natural resources companies, we had very, very few. So I looked at the policy that gave rise to the clusters and said, this completely changes the way we do innovation in Canada. Instead of single slingshot solo investments in small companies, this required organizations to work together, multinationals, national leaders, universities, research institutions, government organizations, community organizations, and SMEs to work together around a table to build technologies together better than any one of them could on its own. And that's a mouthful, and it's really hard to do, but after 7 years, it works. And we can talk about that later.
I was going to say, Kendra, has it worked?
So, yes, well, it's working. I think we're still, I would say, so when I got into this role, I was a partner at Deloitte. And so I was involved in technology, and Deloitte had done a lot of reports in 2013, 14, 15 that said our productivity is lagging. We're not exporting enough. We're not investing enough in technology. That was back in 2015. And so that was one of the reasons I actually got involved with this program in the first place, because it was trying to tackle that challenge. And so I think Sue said slingshot. We used to say peanut butter approach. So we would take a peanut butter approach to our innovation investments all across the country. And so this program was really trying to concentrate on that investment. I think one of the big challenges is collaboration is a lot easier to say than it actually is to do. And so when you're trying to drive, I mean, I'm based in Atlantic, Canada. The first challenge I had was getting Nova Scotia to work with Newfoundland. So when you look at Atlantic Canada from the rest of Canada, it seems like one big place. But when you actually operate there, they are 4 distinct provinces, 4 distinct jurisdictions, 4 distinct set of objectives. And so the idea that they're just going to work together was actually a really big deal at the time. So then I went out to the West Coast and they said, well, you're building an East Coast supercluster. We're going to build a West Coast supercluster. And I said, what would be really great is if we actually worked together. And COVID helped with that because it did bring down geographic barriers, because now everyone's sitting on a little screen. You don't know if they're sitting in Northern Quebec or they're sitting on the West Coast or they're sitting on the East Coast. So that was a really big deal. But collaboration is hard, and trying to apply cluster theory at a national level is also hard because clusters are based on geographic density. So one of the things that we focused on was, how do we make sure that each of our individual hubs, whether you're a Center for Ocean Ventures and Entrepreneurship in Halifax, or you're the launch in Newfoundland, or you are a coast that sits in Victoria, how do we make each of them strong? Because strength in different geographies with what makes sense to them makes us nationally a network of networks that achieves our goals.
Julian? The beginning,
Yeah.
I think that Scale AI, we didn't have a budget that referenced AI or artificial intelligence 137 times that I think we learned today from Mark. What has changed? What is different as you look back?
You know, it's funny because I think we experience at Scale AI and in the industry, you know, the typical curve of innovation where you have the hype effect, the Death Valley, and now gradually maturity of innovation. So when we launched Scale AI back in 2019, it was really the hype effect. We received more than $750 million of letter of intent of companies willing to adopt AI. Meaning the 750 is just the mark which we reached some weeks ago. So it took us 5 years actually to go where companies thought they would be in 2017, 2018. So that was really the hype effect. Then obviously, COVID and the hype disappeared in a sense that when in 2022 we had the discussion about renewing the supercluster, AI was not at all the focus. Guess we're not completely right because ChatGPT launched just some weeks after that, but AI was really treated as something not as critical as it used to be for Canada. Obviously, after 2022, ChatGPT arrived, agentic AI, LLMs and everything, and so obviously AI is now again on the rise. And so we see that clearly, meaning back in the days in 2017, 2018, 2019, we were financing $30 million worth of projects in AI. Now we are on more than $70 million a year value of projects. So that has completely changed. But I think we have seen the full cycle in just 5 years, which is hype, death, and then grow again. And really the generative AI has totally changed the rules of the game.
Tyler, you've been around for 8 years. What's the one thing you wish you would have known? What is one thing that surprised you over those 8 years? And now you're on the other side because you were on the board and then you were the chair of the board and now you're the CEO. Seems like a pretty significant demotion. But anyway, unpack that for us.
Unpack me moving from chair to being CEO. I think from our perspective, it was the natural resources that are growing, across the country, the crops that are produced in agriculture. And we started talking, it was Protein Industries Canada. And we had that alt meat hype, Beyond Meats, Impossible Foods, really elevated stocks and a lot of excitement. And then kind of consumer trends started to change. They were looking for cleaner labels. I think one of the things that I wish now, and we pivoted quickly, we weren't just about plant proteins. We were about whole seed composition. I mean, the seed that we produced, whether it's a pulse crop, a cereal crop, an oilseed crop like canola, there's components, high value components. So we weren't just about protein, and we weren't just about protein for food. A lot of the protein or the crops that we grow also end up being feed. So we've had a whole bunch of research projects, and I thank everyone in the room involved in research. It's such a critical engine and your ability to pivot. But I mean, the Protein Industries Canada is quite descriptive. I think it can be limiting. I would like us to be something on value-added ingredients or food production Canada, something that insinuates it's not just about the primary producer, it's about the consumer. And we're able, through very innovative research projects and investments, to create multiples of economic returns when we decompose that seed and the protein or the starch or the fiber or the oil. We can create final products. We can create intermediate products. We can do that on the prairies where the crop is grown or across Ontario and Quebec where there's corn and soybeans predominantly. Or we can do that where the urban populations exist, where the consumers are. So I think looking at food production and agriculture collectively is much more accurate in terms the breadth of research and the importance to the economy of the research that is completed. And I think that's kind of where we started, and the hype up of plant proteins, it's in a materially different place today than when we started back in 2018.
Now, you've championed the fact that food security is national security. What specifically are you doing to ensure national security by ensuring food security for Canada?
Yeah, it's a great question because
it's the one you gave me. He asked me to ask that question, so
I don't know if it was. Are we going to banter the whole panel or
bring it?
Okay, yeah. I mean, our food security is national sovereignty, and a population that's well fed like we are is very secure, and we're looked at by the investment community domestically as abroad as being a very stable place to invest because we're food secure. I mean, we just prior to the last federal election, we did some national research, and 95% of Canadians feel that food security or food sovereignty should be a priority for Canada. So when I say that, that means that we need to move beyond just growing a crop, but our opportunity is to create incremental value, a population that understands that value-added food production really does create a more stable population, and it results in Canada being a very stable place to invest.
And Rob, we have heard everyone use the word AI, and the second most used word right now is dual use. So is it a thing? Is it an opportunity? When companies you're working with, is it real? Is it significant? Is there an opportunity for us to be looking carefully at the companies within the portfolio of the clusters?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key thing to point out here is that our portfolio of companies and projects that we've funded, they all have commercially viable solutions, right? So rather than asking the question, what capabilities do we need to spin up specifically for defense, we should be looking at the capabilities that already exist in Canada and thinking to ourselves, how can they be pivoted into a defense space? And just to pick up on the earlier questioning about, what are some of the things that we wish we would have known going in, I would echo what Kendra said around the fact that collaboration is very easy to talk about, but in practice, it's much more difficult. If you look at some of the criteria around supercluster projects and the fact that they must involve SMEs, when you're bringing small and medium companies to the table and then you're sitting them down next to these large multinational manufacturing corporations with massive legal teams and budgets, I think we maybe underestimated the degree to which those conversations would be difficult. So over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, we've done a lot of work to build up our own internal capabilities on the legal side to make sure that the outcomes we're seeing are fair in terms of licensing arrangements and foreground IP that's coming out of the project so that we're protecting the SMEs in these consortia.
So did we pick the right areas? Is digital? I mean, I think what I've heard first heard the term digital supercluster, it was like, well, I think everything's digital, or it's atoms. So we should have an atom or bits supercluster. But did we pick the right ones? And have you been able to pivot to make sure that Canada is able to take advantage and exploit the opportunities as these technologies and these areas of focus have shifted?
Yeah, for sure. I think we picked the right areas, and we'll all tell those stories. Just from the perspective of digital, when your handle's digital, the world is your oyster. And what we decided very early on was we would go into the sectors that were most important and most relevant for growing Canada's economy, improving productivity, and growing, as I mentioned earlier, small companies into larger companies. So we started off right out of the gate in 2018 focusing on natural resources, primarily mining, but a little bit in some of the other areas, forestry, et cetera. We focused on health and life sciences. Health is the single largest budget item in every provincial budget in this country, and it's rising faster than GDP. Do the math. We got to fix it. And we focused on skilling, because what we realized is there was a real demand for the mid-skill, senior-skilled people in various elements of the technology landscape by employers that they couldn't get. And there were large swaths of the Canadian population that would be underemployed for their entire lives because they could not find their way or afford to go into the traditional skilling cycle. So those were the three areas we focused on. Natural resources, in particular mining, critical minerals, health and life sciences, and skilling. We then got a call a few years later that said, hey, can you help with housing? And I said, what did you have in mind? And they said, this is the province of BC. They said, we're not sure, but we think you can figure it out. So we entered the housing markets, or the housing sector. And so did we pick the right groups? I think so, because what we've seen and heard across the five of us is that we've evolved as the economy has evolved. And just to close off, just in terms of digital, did we get it right? Did the Government of Canada get it right? We had an independent economic review done earlier this year, completely independent of the Government of Canada and completely independent of us. We've just got the results of that report. I won't regale you with all of them, but a couple of key findings by that review. 12 times return on investment from the Government of Canada. That's pretty good, 12x ROI. $324 million has been invested in digital. That's a lot of money. We've delivered $4 billion in GDP, 34,000 jobs, 190 commercial products that are generating revenue for Canadian companies, 730 IP assets that must stay in Canada. And just a sidebar on the IP point there, a large multinational that's doing work with us that has its head office and all of its IP offshore in a country that's not Canada, wants to do work with us, wants the IP to go into Ireland where they have their IP retained. And we said no. They are building their first ever research institute in British Columbia so they can continue to work with digital and keep their IP, because they have to keep their IP here. So, you know, I think those are some good data points and some good stories.
Wonderful. Kendra, you started and you were a partner at Deloitte, and somebody said Ocean Supercluster. And you said, okay. Have you been surprised at the emergence and growth of recognition around the importance of the blue economy, around the importance of oceans, both for what we take out of the ocean, but what we build with things that come out of the ocean, and the technology necessary to ensure the safety, security, and health of our oceans? Has this surprised you? Because it really, in my opinion, what I've seen, it's really emerged as being a key area globally, not just in Canada.
Yes, so that was a slightly longer conversation. And the conversation went, if you really care about Canada, you should be doing this job, not the one that you're currently doing. That was my husband. So in terms of ocean, so I did a lot of research actually before I went into this role. So, you know, my grandmother is from Nova Scotia, back and forth to the ocean. My husband's a Newfoundlander. I was living in Newfoundland at the time. But I hadn't really paid attention to ocean from an economic perspective. And so the ocean economy is outpacing the growth of the broader global economy, so that is significant. So this was back in 2018, it was set to double by 2030 to $3 trillion US. With the exchange rate at the moment, it's about 4 trillion Canadian. It actually is now going to hit that goal by 2025. And if you look at Canada, despite having the longest coastline in the world, we have the 4th largest ocean territory, about half of that is in the north in terms of our coastline. We are only contributing about 1.8% to our GDP from ocean, and the world average is 3.2. And so we are significantly undersized. So if you look at Norway or Iceland, they're sort of 30, 40%. And even if you argue that they're less diversified than we are under contributing in terms of what the ocean can do. And so that is a significant opportunity. So we looked at that and we said, could we be 5 times? If we were 5 times what we are today by 2030, by 2035, that's 220 billion. That would take us to about 5% GDP. And that would be absolutely huge. That would make us bigger than oil and gas and also bigger than manufacturing. So a huge, huge opportunity for Canada. And for me, bringing the technology in. So this is all about technology in the ocean and particularly instrumentation. So ocean observation, whether you are defense, whether you are aquaculture, whether you're better understanding weather patterns, whether you're trying to improve shipping lanes, all of those things depend on better data. And now you're seeing AI coming into the ocean economy. Why? Because you've got all these things that are collecting data increasingly, and we want to be able to make better decisions about the use of the ocean.
I got one. This is an open one. This is from my colleague, Colette. She's texting me, telling me how I'm doing. But she says, if you could redesign one aspect of the way that government supports innovation ecosystems in Canada, what would have the biggest impact? And you can't say money.
Stick with what works.
Okay.
I would say timing, visibility, continuity.
Okay.
I'd say increasing how we work together. So we introduced parties in individual provinces doing the same thing that had never spoken to each other. And what we've seen is if you can know what we know and then get the synergy of all of that, we can move faster and we can be more globally competitive.
I'd say be patient, and I think that's already been said, but I will state it from this perspective. I spoke to a Swedish Innovation Parliament about a month ago, and they wanted to know about the Global Innovation Cluster Program in Canada. I was there representing the clusters here in the program. They have exceptionally fragmented research that's not really efficient, it's not aligned, collaboration is low within little small micro communities or business parks. And they're looking at Canada saying Canada's got it right. Canada's already recapitalized once. We need to be doing what Canada's doing. So I really hope that the federal government continues to prioritize this research because it is something that the rest of the world notices, and we need to take note that it's exceptionally effective at facilitating collaboration, albeit very difficult, in our own country, and we are tremendous at research. We just now need to move to scale up and commercialization and economic outcomes, and that is coming.
I think from my perspective, what I would say is a focus on the customer. It's one thing to invest in R&D and research, but if all of those innovation assets are fleeing the country and the value of those assets are being realized in other jurisdictions, that is not the best use of taxpayer dollars. So focusing on adoption and bringing industry to the table and forcing those collaborations between industry and academia so that we have a demand pull in the innovation ecosystem, that's what's really going to drive impact.
Well, it leads me to a question around where do you see the biggest gap between the research capabilities and our ability to scale as a nation? Rob?
Well, I would say, I think what we've seen particularly in the advanced manufacturing space is the translation from the research side into the commercial side isn't always great. Part of that is because oftentimes technology firms will come to the manufacturing sector with a pre-baked solution that they assume is turnkey, and that is 99% of the time not the case. So what we're trying to do by driving these collaborations is making sure that the technology providers actually understand the end use, looking at not just their customer, but their customer's customer, so that they can build tailored solutions that actually drive value in the manufacturing space. So that's what I think the main focus is at NGen.
Julien?
How can I say that? What people have not a great sense about going from research to commercialization, meaning people have the thinking that if they design a software in a lab, that will work. And it's exactly what Rob is saying. And we had good example around that, meaning companies like Vuban or MoveAI or Ivado Labs were creating by integrating research into their businesses. 83% of our projects include researchers. But when companies like Vuban is using researchers, they are using 5 or 10 researchers out of 200 people. And they have, around these researchers, you have data scientists, data engineers, business developers, system integrators, because you need that basically to transform research in AI, at least, into real operational products that are commercially live. And so that's, something I hear too much, which is it's easy to go from research to commercialization, give money to research, and then you'll have products. That's not happening that way by far. We have the experience of that, and that's really something everybody needs to hear, because there's a huge implication around where you put your money. Do you put your money, again, more and more in research? That's fine, we have a great research, we need it. Or you think about how do we put money in the right places to be sure that this research will effectively translate into not proof of concept, not testing, but real commercially live projects.
Sue?
Yeah, I think your question was the biggest challenge or the biggest difficulty. Let me turn that around a little bit, say the biggest opportunity. The biggest opportunity for Canada is to adopt Canadian-made technology. We are respected rightly around the world as having one of the most effective research university systems, bar none. Well-deserved. We have some of the best research. AI, if you think of Yoshio Bengio, Jeff Hinton, et cetera, was commercialized in the United States. And what we find quite often, and we found early on in Digital's journey, was products would be developed in Canada, and then they would be adopted outside of Canada. The technologies coming out of Digital are deployed in 93 countries around the world. If you want to have a healthcare technology adopted in Great Britain, you make one proposal to the NHS. It's not quite that simple, but it's close to that. If you want to have a healthcare technology adopted in a particular province in Canada, 28 submissions. Do the math. You're a small company. So the biggest opportunity for Canada right now, and I can think of no time better when we can grab onto this, is to celebrate the adoption and drive the adoption of Canadian-made technologies to help build our security, build our national defense, build our GDP, build our companies, and really fly the flag in terms of using the technology that we develop in this country, because it's really good.
Take a moment. Are there questions from the audience? Roger Scott Douglas.
Thank you, Ian and colleagues. That's a great session so far. How has your life changed by adding the word global to your title?
We didn't add it.
It's a good question. How has it changed?
You know, in the AI space, that's a very interesting question typically, because in the AI space, back in 2018, 2019, 2020, the industry was not mature enough to think globally, meaning people were just creating solutions for the local Canadian market. But at one point, we discovered that these people actually had great products that were ready to export. And so typically we switch part of our activity to more presenting these people outside of Canada. And that's where the word global took more sense. The way we did it is, first of all, we went to Vivatech in Europe back in 2024 and 2025. Initially 50 companies, 100 companies last year. We created All-In in Montreal to be sure that all the world would see innovation in Canada, because we thought part of our mission was not only create local demand for AI, not only create local IP and IP solutions in AI, but also promote these solutions outside of Canada to be able to create value. So that was our interpretation of this global thing, which is helping our AI ecosystem to shine internationally and export and create wealth for Canada.
Kendra, did it change the way you approached your job or the focus and priorities of Oceans?
So no, I don't think so. We really thought about global from the beginning. So because we're such a small part of Canadian GDP and we have a small domestic market, a lot of our sectors are just global by nature. So if you think about shipping, if you think about where we sell our fish products and aquaculture, or energy, those are all international sectors. So we really looked at where do we need to be, what markets do we need to connect into, and we were born as the ocean cluster based on the Norwegian model for clusters. And I think we should not lose sight of how innovative the policy was. So what's really exciting for me is a whole group of people went to Norway to figure out how to build the ocean supercluster, and then Norway has come to Canada to find out how to build a supercluster. So I think that's a real testament to what we've been able to do. And so we continue to really push on global relationships, global markets. One of the biggest challenges that our companies have is access to capital, and where they're getting that capital in this moment is internationally. So our companies are investing in Norway, France, Singapore, England, UK, and so it's really, we're working on how do we get more access to domestic capital, but for now, our companies need to be able to scale, and so they're going globally. So how do we make sure that we are creating inroads into those markets to be able to get the investment they need to scale, to be able to introduce them to new markets where they're able to find new customers and new opportunities. So, and we continue to do that, and now Canada is part of the Blue Tech Cluster Alliance, and again, a testament to the work that we've been doing. We are now the co-chair to Canadian, one local cluster and the national supercluster, chairing that, and that has Japan, France, Spain, the UK, Portugal, and the US. And so that's an exciting role for us to be able to not only be part of the international conversation, but now driving the international conversation in ocean.
Do you want to jump in on this, Tyler?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if anything intentionally changed with the word global, but I would say that we recognize that the world is looking for more Canada from a food production and agriculture perspective. So what does that mean is, you know, we've now been working closely with some large markets like Southeast Asia that has a growing middle class looking for more proteins in plant and animal. And so they're going to require different ingredients and products. So it's, you know, they don't have the space, but they have the capital. So the foreign direct investment. So it allows us to take the research that's done here in Canada predominantly, that we're helping to facilitate and ensure collaboration, but it's bringing investment here for us to create, you know, intermediate or final products, and they go into markets that are looking for more Canada. So we have a global perspective. We've got other regions of the world now saying, how do we do that? How do we test and how do we understand what you're capable of producing? Because Canada is exceptionally unique. I mean, the US is a different geography, and what we produce here in Canada from a primary agriculture perspective, you can't just lift and shift and say, no, let's do that stateside. That doesn't work. We have generally cool weather crops that turn into high value ingredients, and the world is looking for more Canada. So the global perspective truly is causing us to say, how do we appeal more globally so that we generate more demand for what we can create domestically?
We're going to go back to this. We have a question over here on this side.
Thank you very much, panel, for sharing the insights. And it's great for me to see all of you here since I'm interested in innovation ecosystem. I'm Nasrin, postdoc scholar at McGill, doing research on innovation and collaboration in healthcare. So when we talk about innovation ecosystem, collaborative innovation ecosystem, integration of technology, it often happens, and I observed it in my research very often. For example, in healthcare technology, there are at least two sides, healthcare and technology. And on both sides, groundbreaking research are happening. But the point is that they don't speak the same language. They don't speak the same vocabularies. And at the same time, even though they are doing excellent work, they are not necessarily trained to manage the innovation. So I'm curious to know when you decide to support a project, whether and how you consider these aspects.
Good question. Who wants to take this one?
On our side, Scale AI, we decided to do some health, but really specific to the logistics of the hospitals and care at home, more or less. So, but in that case, you're perfectly right. One of the issues we had is hospitals are not willing to pay for anything, meaning they don't have budget, it's on provincial money, they need to negotiate budgets very far in advance, so it's very hard. So we decided to adjust, with the support of IZ, by the way, some of our criteria to be able to fund 100% of the project, but only funding the external part. So we're not funding the hospital resources, we are funding the external people they use to develop the solution. And we focus a lot on the governance to be sure that basically the solution will be developed the right way with hospital practitioners, but then will be used after that. Because part of the issue is solution being created, but not being used because people think they were not sufficiently involved in the creation of the solution to really use it. So it has been quite successful. We have done 2 waves of project, more or less funded for $25 million of value of projects in logistics. So logistics can be logistics surgery rooms, for example, to adjust surgery, resources in ICUs, or different things. So it can be very lot of things, or a lot of example of logistics, but always the same model, and it worked.
So you want to jump into this?
Yeah, just a quick comment, and thank you for your brave question about the health system. It's fragmented, right, when it comes to adoption, and that's really quite stifling for especially small entrepreneurs, and that's where, you know, an organization like Digital has entered into the health space, and really remarkable health technologies have emerged from those investments, but getting them adopted has been tricky. And so adopting them nationally is really not something that the Canadian health system is set up for. And even adoption at a provincial level is challenging because each province has its own structure. And so we've taken it to a point where we look for coalitions of the willing And so large health systems, I'll give the example in British Columbia, Providence Healthcare, one of the largest healthcare providers in the country, has proven to be both excited about investing in innovation that they then adopt, but also hungry and thirsty for adopting technologies that are developed by others through our model. And so Providence Healthcare has really adopted a number of health technologies that have changed the healthcare landscape. I'll just give you one example. Wound care. No, let me use another one. Let me use ultrasound. Ultrasound, you know, if you're living in Ottawa, you probably don't think twice about ultrasound. You make your appointment, you go to the hospital, and you get your ultrasound done. If you're living in the vast part of this country that is remote, getting an ultrasound done is expensive, time-consuming, and very, very difficult. And so you throw that problem out to innovators in Canada, and you come up with a handheld ultrasound. It's about the size of a phone. And you're out kayaking off the northern coast of British Columbia, you don't feel well. And you really don't feel well, so you kayak back in. You walk to your physician, because you can, you're living in Haida Gwaii. He takes out his handheld ultrasound, rubs it over your chest, and the images are immediately transmitted to the cardiac care unit at Providence Healthcare. You're medevac down to the hospital, and your life is saved. We can do that in Canada across the entire country. We need to build more willingness to adopt across the health system.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We got a question over here.
Thank you very much. Ariane Morelli from the Canadian Institute of Health Research, where I'm one of the scientific directors. I want to just build on the point you just made. It is clear that we have a huge, very costly health crisis in Canada. And to move beyond and make some progress, we need to bring innovation to the bedside and to the healthcare system to completely change the way we deliver healthcare. I would want to hear from each of you what it would take for you as a company to make that membrane with us as research funders much more porous. What is it that is preventing us from interacting with companies like yourselves to really catalyze the innovation that we need to move healthcare delivery in Canada forward? What is it that we need to do to make that membrane a lot more porous? Applying for individual projects by individual research groups, such as we've just heard, is one mechanism, but I'm talking on a much more national level, how we can collaborate and partner to move healthcare forward with innovation in Canada. Two products that are very uniquely Canadian, because healthcare in Canada is uniquely Canadian and recognized internationally as well.
So is it okay if we talked about generic membrane, or do we want to stick with specific healthcare? Okay, because it's an important one. So I'll open it up.
So I'd be curious, I don't know if I should do a show of hands or not, but how many industry folks we have in the room in representing industry? A couple of hands. Yeah. So I think that is certainly for us in Ocean, that is the fundamental start of the problem is we're talking about the same problem, but we do it, there's a research conference that talks about those problems, and then there's an industry conference that talks about those problems. There's a policy conference, maybe in some cases you get 2 out of 3 that are having that conversation. And what's fascinating is they might be using completely different terms to explain the same problem. And so that getting people together, and I think that is part of the magic of this program, is how do you get those conversations that are happening across so that you are collaborating. And so because we fund industry, then industry is working with academic institutions, and I can say, you know, in Ocean, we need a lot of science. We need science to inform ocean policy, and we need science to inform our companies. You can't do something like sink seaweed to do carbon sequestration and not understand the scientific implications of doing that to our ocean. But I see it over and over again that there is a cultural divide. There are some researchers that don't want to taint the research with having to do commercialization, right? There are some industry folks that have worked with academics and it's too slow, it doesn't move fast enough, and so they've given up trying to make that work. There's a huge cultural difference that is a major barrier that we see in getting industry and research working together.
What can we do about the cultural bias?
Put them in the room. So we try to find those that are willing to work together, and then we encourage that, and then we talk about it, and then we shout it from the rooftops and demonstrate what a great outcome that is. So we see it, for example, in fish feed, right? So again, you are trying to get alternative proteins to feed fish, and there's a lot of science related to that. And then when it works, how do we celebrate that over and over and over again and demonstrate the value?
So celebrating the solutions you find as being passed for people to follow has been an important part of the success of the clusters. Sue,
yeah, and let me just pull on the question. I don't know where the questioner went, but thank you for the question. There you are. Because one of the magic moments of being involved in the cluster is that it deals exactly with what you've just said. And it's been easier in some sectors, our experience, it's been easier in some sectors, mining companies, super interested in learning and working together and breaking down the traditional or what might have been perceived frictions between large companies, small companies, regulators, et cetera. Health has been a little bit more difficult, but the example that I just gave, I could regale you all evening with examples of health technologies that are being deployed. They're not being deployed ubiquitously, but they are being deployed one by one. But part of the magic of this program is bringing those different disparate parties together around the table to learn and listen from each other so that you can then solve problems together rather than doing that. And it works. It works. I gave you the data points earlier in terms of the economic outputs and the products and services. And so what we need in the health system is a coalition of the willing to say, hey, let's try this again, or let's keep trying it, let's build on it, because it does work.
Thank you. We had a question over here.
Yeah, I'm about to be deliberately provocative here, so just kind of hold on a half moment. I feel like I've been the subject of a bait and switch. My name is Brad Wallace. I work for Defence Research and Development Canada. And when I was reading the name of this, it specifically mentioned for national defense. And I believe I've heard the word defense 3 times, twice by the gentleman at the end there. I'd love to hear you guys talk about that. I'd love for you to make the case how your innovation clusters can support national defense. Now, I'm going to add a caveat here. I'm not talking about security, energy security, food security, water security. I'm thinking about defense in the terms of something that somebody in uniform might look at and say, yes, that is very relevant to me. So, please.
No, that's absolutely fair. That is completely and utterly my fault. It's licensed as a moderator to decide where you want to put emphasis and not. But it's not bait and switch. We can talk about defense. So why don't we take his question and open it up across the board to see what we have to contribute here. Tyler?
All right, let the guy that said let's talk about food production and agriculture. But I do believe agriculture is one of the most industrially advanced, and people aren't aware of this, industries we have in Canada. I mean, when you look at AI, precision agriculture, all the science and technology that goes into it. One of the areas that we're spending a lot more time in is drone applications. And drone applications for agricultural purposes, to improve efficiencies, to get to more precision type agriculture level is very relatable to national defense and security. And that's the type of technology that likely exists for a very different purpose, but can be applied to whether it's the safety of our military personnel or whether it's, trying to, defend our country. And there's lots of ways, but that type of technology exists in agriculture as one of the most advanced industries that we have in Canada, but that's quite understood by everyone aside from those of us that work in that echo chamber ourselves.
Wonderful. Robbie?
Yeah, so I would just say, there's a lot of talk these days about dual use. And one of the biggest challenges here is that, frankly, in Canada and in the federal government, we really don't have a solid understanding of where, in the advanced manufacturing case, where our capabilities exist across the country. The understanding is so poor, frankly, that we've had conversations about wanting to bring Ukrainian drone manufacturers into Canada to talk about how they're building drones in the battlefield, where we have manufacturers in Canada that are actually building drones and shipping them to Ukraine. So we need to start by looking internally, and the clusters can play a really important role because we understand where those capabilities exist across the country. So if we're being told we have specific defense supply requirements, clusters can be a really strong mechanism in terms of knowing where to look across the country to find the right capabilities to meet those needs.
Julien?
Yeah, I mean, when we think the people in green, you should think about logistics also, because in the US Army, you have one soldier for 10 people behind him just to feed him, put ammunition, etc. So obviously, our specialty at Scale AI is really working on improving business processes in AI, using AI, and basically logistics are a key part. When you look at the war in Ukraine, what Russia is doing is destroying infrastructure, basically. So resilience of infrastructure is key. If you think about Europe right now, Europe is looking at how to be sure you can deliver tanks and anything to the eastern borders, because they are not sure all the bridges, the tunnels, and the highways can support them. So it's absolutely critical to look at that, critical infrastructures, meaning in that case, ports, highways, crane terminals, etc., to be able just to fight. And so that's something where we are really working at that. Most of the projects we do are around leveraging and improving logistics and critical infrastructures, and that's typically something that will be critical for Canada. If you think also about critical industries, meaning think about the Davie shipyards or the Irving shipyards, they will need to use AI to improve their productivity. Because instead of building one icebreaker every 3 years or 4 years, they perhaps can take 6 months at one point. I don't know icebreaker business, but meaning my point is, it's sure that you have efficiencies leveraging AI, and that will ultimately serve the people who have to fight. So that's where really at Scale AI we are absolutely dedicated to work on this dual use or supporting the defense industry in their business improvements.
Sue, and then we'll go to Kendra.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Thank you for getting us back on track. So when I made my opening comments, I said when we're digital, the world's kind of your oyster, and we wanted to go where Canada needed us most. And it was pretty clear a few years ago that we were going to be in a bit of a defense, either opportunity or threat. It looked like an opportunity there in terms of helping in Ukraine and others, and then of course now we've got other issues. And so we plowed through our portfolio. And looked at how can a technology that might have been developed for a certain purpose be redeployed, the dual use terminology. And I can tell you a couple of examples. Some I can't tell you, but I can tell you a couple of examples. A technology used to X-ray into the earth to discover critical minerals for the mining sector can also be used to perhaps discover tunnels or other things. Technology that was developed in 2019, 2020 to discover dark vessels that were raping the ocean of fish stocks, not so much in Canada, but in other parts of the world, deployed in other parts of the world. That technology could be used to discover other things that are in the ocean. And so we have really taken a look at our entire portfolio and looked at it through a defense lens rather than a health lens or a mining lens. And that kind of creative thought and bringing the creativity of entrepreneurs and innovators into that conversation really opens your mind as to how a technology that might have one purpose, really dual purpose, is a very pragmatic approach and very pragmatic way of taking a technology and using it for the current situation.
Wonderful. Kendra?
So 3 of our borders are ocean. So when we think about defense, I think there's huge opportunity in ocean. And where we look at where do we have a border dispute in the north, it's actually in the ocean. It's not the land border, it's the ocean border that's in dispute. And so one of the key areas where we know we have lots of technology that applies is in the surveillance space and ocean observation. So we've got projects that are taking satellite data, sensors, smart buoys, drones, and then collecting data. And if you can use a sensor or you can use a hydrophone to find a whale, you can use it to find a submarine. For example, we've got projects that are looking for ordnances for wind farms, but you can also use that same technology in terms of subsea warfare. So there's all these examples of where we have already, or we are developing. We've got a project that is swarm technology, so going off the ship and then using a swarm of drones to be able to collect data. And then in the north, we're so sparsely populated that to be able to do the level of surveillance that we're looking for, we absolutely need to use technology to be able to do that. But that also brings in the complexity of working with Indigenous communities. And so I think that is one of the key challenges in terms of defense in Arctic is making sure that we do that in a way that is respectful to community. And so we have done a number of projects already and been in the north. One of our drone projects, for example, is working with an Indigenous company to be able to make sure the drone doesn't freeze and fall out of the air when it's in the north. But there's all kinds of examples of also, it's not just about the technology, it's also about the model and how you work with community as we're trying to do what we're trying to do. I think the last piece is, we work, 97% of our projects are small and medium enterprises. I think one of the challenges that we've got in conversations with the primes is one, the additional level of national security in terms of the due diligence around companies, how to work with the small and medium enterprises, how do you take something from commercial into the additional rigor that it actually needs if it is, protecting troops or being used in a different way. And so those conversations are all live in terms of it's dual use is kind of like collaboration. It's an easy word to say, but the practical path that gets a small company to be able to get to that is still, I think, a bit murky.
Okay, I want to thank you all for answering that and not taking my original statement with too much offense. So I appreciate that. I would really like to urge each and every one of you to contact Defence Research and Development Canada if you haven't already. It's great to talk about your capabilities here, but if you were to talk to us actually in national defense, we can give you a better idea of how we can perhaps help you and perhaps put some ideas into your head so that we can go dual use on many of your technologies. I'll just point out the obvious that National Defense is looking to get a fair amount of money over the next few years. From my point of view, you guys are doing great work. I'd love to see you guys be able to get some of it to help us help you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you for the offer. I think it goes back to that notion of collaboration as being so important, especially now and where we are. Ilse Turnick used to always say that Canada is a very big country and yet a very small country, and we really need to gang up together to take on the world, and I think the more that we can be working together, the better. I heard music before, but I assume that doesn't mean that we're over because the music stopped, so we're going to keep going. So I guess the one question that I've got is, speaking of Ilse, we did hear from Ilse and the Council of Canadian Academies, and Karim Bardizi was here with us as well. What is it you take from that study that is going to change the way you do things, or has made you pause to think maybe that there are additional things or different things or additional things that we need to be doing in response to what the report had to say? Tyler?
You got me. 4 weeks on the job, and I'm now going to say
it's okay.
I can talk about a lot, but
that's okay.
You got me there.
That's fair. What for those others in the room who have had a chance to look at the report, anything that struck you? Okay. Mark Sean was here for lunch. Did anybody? You saw Mark today? Mark said one of the biggest challenges that we're facing is awareness and literacy and adoption was the word he used, adoption of AI. He talked about not focusing on the top of the triangle and a very small number of companies as other nations are pursuing as a strategy, but really focusing on the bottom, which is where the impact can be made and the success can be had. He also, I think, was an important reminder of the fact that we've been investing in AI for a very, very long period of time at a very high level, and that has given us, and I think reaped the benefits and the value that we're now able to take and build upon. He did talk about hundreds of thousands of companies and adoption, and he did talk about 41 million Canadians. What do you think your organization could do with your mandate to support what Mark has put on the table?
Well, from a Scale AI perspective, that's core of what we are supposed to do, which is helping companies adopt AI. The thing is, I want to react on the figures because for Canada, there are two very important things. One is improving productivity for companies, and that's really through AI introduction, which is great. But longer term, it's also to create an AI industry. Because if we don't create an AI industry, well, basically we'll have a lot of companies adopting AI, but they will only use US or Chinese or whoever solutions. And it will happen exactly what happened in the digital media, which is all the advertising money will go outside of Canada. So that's not what we want. So we need to balance two things. One is penetration of AI and growth of AI adoption on one side, but also the ability to build our own AI industry. And both have to be in parallel because if we grow too fast on the adoption side, we just promote IP which is not built in Canada, and that will never create wealth for Canada. So the challenge we need all to find is what's the right path to do it, improving AI penetration much faster than we need today, but at the same time supporting an AI industry to be sure that long term we can still grab some value out of this industry.
I love that because I'm with you completely. That I think that we've seen over the years, whether it was Web 2.0 or whether it was the internet, is we saw disruptive technology, a shift in jobs and a loss of jobs, but a huge opportunity for us as a nation. And I agree completely with you that it is about adoption. It's also about building an army of agents, right? Really seeing how we can become a nation of AI entrepreneurs, building not just what we need, but what the world needs. Kendra?
Yeah, so, back in 2022, when we were asked if we could deploy pan-Canadian AI money into commercialization in ocean, we said yes, but the institutes were not doing much in the way of ocean, and I was told that putting AI money into ocean was a very risky investment. And and we didn't have, I think we had 5 or 6 projects that were thinking about AI at the time. And so, yes, that was just before ChatGPT came out, but now we've got 60% of our portfolio that is developing some kind of AI application. But we're also spending time now thinking about how do you help the average individual experiment with AI, right? Because that is what will create the speed in terms of adoption. And so I saw some of the top lines of the report, which is we continue to go in the wrong direction when it comes to productivity and innovation. And so we need to change that. And we're only going to change that by actually encouraging everyone to touch it, play with it, experiment it, and move quickly, because that removes the barriers. And I will say, as a mother, if I can do it at my level, my daughter rolls her eyes constantly. Oh, you're checking ChatGPT again. You're checking ChatGPT again. But now she does it, right? So how do we just create that whole cultural shift that we need to adopt technology more quickly, to achieve the productivity and competitiveness gains that we need, and attract the talent that we need? Because we're also seeing talent headed in the wrong direction, and that is really scary for our future.
Wonderful. Robbie?
I would just say from the NGEN perspective in the advanced manufacturing space, we need to consider industrial adoption of AI as a key driver for our AI strategy. We recently convened a panel of some of the largest manufacturers across Canada, the Martin Reyes, the Linamars, and what we're hearing is they're struggling just as much as the small companies with adoption of AI. So, looking at industrial adoption as a lever, and then also looking at Canadian content, where can we bring the tech to those manufacturers, help with their adoption, to really be a key driver of the strategy.
And of course, this productivity has plagued us for a very long period of time in a whole bunch of different ways. Do we think that AI is going to allow us to leapfrog? Is this our moment where we can actually have a significant impact? Sue?
It better be. You know, we're all quoting Stuart McLean now with the moments, but this is a moment. We're hearkening back to the very beginning of the panel where we were talking about AI being developed by born, whatever word you want to use, by Yoshio Bengio and Geoff Hinton, commercialized in the United States. Now we have a moment. You can look at it as a threat, but I see it as an opportunity for us to make a step change. And while I get the provinces, I get all of the micro communities that we have across this country. We're a vast geography, we're a small population, and now is the time we can act like a country. And we've got a national pan-Canadian AI strategy. We've got a minister of AI. We've got a parliamentary secretary of AI. I think we've got the government of Canada's attention on the importance of AI. And you've got a vehicle here. There's not 5 vehicles here. There's a vehicle here that can bring together organizations that normally wouldn't work together. Academia, research, government, community, industry leaders, SMEs, innovators, and can help us develop not just a chapter 2 of the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, but actually develop actions and plans to get AI as ubiquitous in industry and society as blood is in our circulatory system. And it's gonna happen. So let's try and do it nationally, because if we do it province by province, community by community, we're not gonna get the benefit, and we'll get confused.
Thank you. So step function, moment, leapfrog, what else do we have here as far as this opportunity?
I think we need to hear Mark Chan when he says we need to change dimension. Meaning altogether, let's say, I don't know the exact figures, but we funded in the magnitude of 1,000 projects, more or less. And obviously, if we want to make a lasting impact on Canada, we need to multiply that by 5 or 10. And that's part of the challenge, because our model is geared really to do thousands or hundreds of projects per year. How can we change our model, adjust our model to do thousands of projects per year? And that requires a lot of things. First of all, it requires money and time. So that's the big question for the future. But that requires also to think about the criteria we use, the way we use, the attention we draw to projects. How do we change that? And I think that's one of the challenges if we want, as a country, to be here to support a strong AI industry. And I think, of course, we should, because that's part of our future. The question will be the same for quantum technologies and others. We need to also think about how do we adjust our model not to deal only about hundreds of projects per year, but thousands of projects. Not 10,000s, because 10,000 mean much too broad and would not be controllable and would create much more opportunities for US than our companies. But how do we ramp up from hundreds to thousands, let's say, per year? I think that's our challenge.
Other comments?
I mean, we have, from an agriculture and food production, there's massive amounts of data. Like, we're over 70 million acres of crops grown and a lot of it's exported. We want to add value to the crop before we export it. But there's that on-farm production improvements. There's the quality improvements. We need to, start. The moment is now. That was your question, and the moment truly is now. And we have such large amounts of data, from the farm to the plate, if you will. And there's opportunities galore. We just need to unpack them and give the research community the confidence to complete the research, and then have the capital community come in behind it and support with offtake and commercialization of the important research to be completed.
Wonderful. Kendra?
Just really quickly, I think if we don't leapfrog, a lot of other countries will. This is a technology that is allowing emerging economies to move really quickly. So one of the things that we try, because we have so many small and medium enterprises, how do we expose them to what's happening in the rest of the world? So if I went to Cape Town, the amount of investment that's going there from Europe, from Asia, from the United States, and Canada is not there. And they are hungry. They are hungry to have what we have. They are hungry to change their environment and leverage these technologies. And so our moment is now, but I think there's just an urgency. I remember Israel a number of years ago, and they said, how did you grow your startup nation? And the person said, well, we wake up every morning worried about who's going to kill us today. And so that creates an urgency. And so how do we replicate that urgency in this moment? Because it is going so fast. And now we have been talking about it being our moment for months and months and months. And so the rest of the world is still moving.
Robbie, last word.
Yeah, I would just say that I think the moment in time right now, Canada has an incredible brand reputation around the world in AI and technology. We saw that NGen took a delegation of about 1,000 Canadian companies and individuals over to Hanover in Germany. We heard it from the German Chancellor. We heard it from companies from all around the world. They came to Canada after that event to meet with companies, strike new deals. So we need more of that. We need to continue to wave the flag and take advantage of the brand recognition that we have in the moment.
That's wonderful. Well, we're going to wrap up here. There will be an opportunity to ask questions afterwards. The panelists are all sticking around, either here or wherever we're going to go next. But I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank all of you for sticking around this afternoon for this session. It was wonderful. I think it was a really good conversation. And I also want to take an opportunity to thank our panelists for joining us here today. And with that, I will say, we're a Jew.